Hi, and welcome to our live broadcast, which is very exciting. Thank you for coming along. You are going to see the very, very new Creative Camino film, um, which is of the Wexford-Pembrokeshire Pilgrim Way, a new pilgrim route, which starts in Ferns in County Wexford, goes down through the beautiful county of Wexford, seeing all these wonderful sights along the way, to Rosslare, over the ferry to Fishguard, and then along the route, the coastal path, exceptionally beautiful, to St David's. So that is the new route, the Wexford-Pembrokeshire Pilgrim Way. So Ancient Connections commissioned or put a call out for artists and a filmmaker because we wanted to document the artist's personal and professional response to this route. So this is what this film is. As well as the four artists, two in Wexford, two in Pembrokeshire, there were a number of community or a number of people from the community who walked the route as well, and the pilgrimage was led by Ian Tweedale of Journeying. So this is what you're going to see now in this film, which is the first time it's been broadcast live like this. It's 28 minutes long. And it's beautiful, and I hope you enjoy it. And then I hope you stick around, because after the film, we're very lucky to have three of the artists with us, and Ian of Journeying, who led the pilgrimage, and Will Philpin of who made the film. So after we watch the film, there'll be a question and answer session. I have some questions I really want to ask them. And if you have some questions, please put it in the chat below. And also, if you have any comments you want to say, what you're feeling about the film or anything, please put it in the comments below. Okay, so here we go. I hope you enjoy the film.
You know, it kind of brings you back to when you were a teenager and used to hang out with people for long periods of time. Brought that innocent, fun, free feeling of just really just having the crack.
Here at the gates of the Cathedral of Ferns, our pilgrimage representing an ancient journey, these hold out their hands, receiving the peaceful blessing of a peace. If the pilgrims would please step forward, will you start begin?
May your hearts be gently softened by water from the well, and may your fears be washed away by water from the well. May entanglements dissolve with water from the well, and may your imagination be inspired by water from the well, and may your soul's thirst be quenched by water from this well.
Feeling lots of emotions together and walking through that together. You know, I just loved just being focused on that one thing together for that week and nothing else.
There were a lot of intimate performances along the route. Something about that kind of ability to carry on through something difficult.
What I call Ilan is the old Irish word for elbow.
Something about the heart of that sound, the pitch of it, I think, and the type of sound. It's like almost like it goes straight to your heart.
Right.
It's not difficult to think of a pilgrimage as something performed, because It has a clear kind of beginning and end. It is something with an intention. It has a clear structure to it. You have an empty stage and someone walks across it, and this is theatre. Well, I guess the empty stage is the pathway, and as soon as a group of people decide that they're going to make that journey, to me there's some element of performing something that you've all committed to together.
Amidst this flow of conversation and walking, finding these more static and still moments where we would stop, there was suddenly this opportunity to try out my own voice in those spaces as an artist, to be with this group of people who are immediately there in that moment to witness it and to hold space and to listen with you. And that's quite rare, to have that held and witnessed.
I think I'd like to leave some gaps as well so that I can hear them. The images that come to mind initially, the wood, walking in the wood with the birds singing so strongly because it was the beginning of May, feeling just like I could just relax and breathe and go with the flow.
Now you're going to, so we'll start with our right foot here, yeah? You're gonna bring it out. So you're gonna lift it up and back at that same rhythm. So we'll do it really big first before we do it right. We'll be like, up, 2, 3, yeah? So we're going 1, 2, 3, up, 2, 3, up, 2, 3, and up, 2, 3, and 1, 2, 3, and back.
Being able to just have that space to walk with people, working against the grain of what society expects of people now, which is a productivity mindset. And the productivity mindset is to, always be working towards things to show how worthy you are of the rest or of the day off. And so was stripping it back to the roots of just humans being on this land and enjoying how our bodies can just bring us through these different landscapes, feel these different emotions, and experience all of that together.
The other surprise was the arrival at Ladies Island. What was special about that route was I really didn't know what was coming. I felt a real need to be quiet with the place and be with the sound of the place. I was quite fascinated by that tern colony, which again I didn't expect. So standing there and seeing the terns and tuning into wide water and wide skies.
The older I get, the more I strip back my outlook on this land in Ireland and my country, well, our country, everyone's country. You just find a deeper appreciation for what was here before us and the energy that still remains and the healing, the collective healing that is happening and more of it that needs to happen. And by connecting to the land through a way of a Camino and a pilgrimage really brings you back to your roots, that raw love that's in everyone, but it's just not maybe visible yet for some people, of how important our land and our culture is, and how the healing within us is right here on our doorstep.
You could feel that ancientness of it as a sacred place, but also in terms of the female and the feminine. Of course, it's no surprise that it was female druids who were there, and then it became, a place of pilgrimage in relation to Our Lady in Catholicism. So that's not a much told story.
Walking around the island, it's really beautiful. I think we walked silently for a bit, and so we really did hear and look and use other senses. I remember at the end of that talking about, the myth of the banshee, which is an Irish character. The thing is that if you find a comb lying on the ground, you're not meant to pick it up because it is a portent of death. Anyway, we suddenly saw a comb. Bonnie and I had been telling the story, and then we suddenly saw this comb, which was extraordinary, and it was on Ladies Island, and we had this idea that we were going to free the banshee from these these constraints, and so I think Susie picked it up.
We're liberating the banshee! Whoa! Ladies Island! Why does she have to?
Very funny and lovely memory, and I remember feeling like they were my allies at that point.
We reached the coast and the beach, and there was this moment of walking barefoot, I think, at this point, seeing the sea and knowing that we were going to cross it, and it felt really significant after having reached there by foot. Okay, whoa, now I'm crossing and going back to my homeland, and the fact that I was kind of returning back there and coming home, and sort of personally what that meant after having moved around so much in the last sort of 7 or 8 years, and then having the opportunity to sort of experience this homecoming. And it was such a beautiful day. The sun was quite strong that day, really early summer sunshine, and the sea was really clear. And we were all chatting oh, we're going to go for a swim, we're not going to go for a swim. We're definitely going to go for a swim. And it was just, this crystal clear water, and just feeling really grateful.
But I remember by the time we got to the ferry, I had nothing left in me, and for me, the crossing was very powerful. I don't know why it was. I really, to this day, don't know why it was. It might have been that I was just really tired and it was day 3. But for me, it might be something to do with the sort of straddling of these two countries that I do. I don't know what that was about, the sort of difficulty of leaving and the joy of arriving. But something happened for me on that ferry. It sort of felt like I didn't want to go. And then when I got to Pembrokeshire, I was so happy to be there when I got there.
It was made more intimate. That day was that day of the mist. It seemed to create something quite special for us. And maybe in terms of that intimacy as well, because we couldn't really see the wide horizon around us. You're more focused in on that monument. To call to mind the things that are forgotten, now in the dust of ages, lost from sight. Like foam of a wave on a lonely seacoast breaking, like the wind's song where there's no ear to mind. I know they're calling to us vainly, old and remembered things of humankind. Exploit and skill of early generations, from tiny cottages or mighty hall, fine tales that centuries ago were scattered, the gods that nobody knows at all.
For me, on the cusp of elderhood, as it were, so, for me it was very much a transition between my younger self and my older self, because I'm 53. That there's that feeling that, who am I going to be as an older person? And I think stepping into that next stage of life, there's a sort of feeling of urgency of who am I, of really properly finding out who you are and remembering who you are.
If I didn't push through the pain and things that I do, my mental health would suffer hugely, and I would say I've pulled out, sat at home and missed out on an amazing opportunity. But by pushing through, it means it still comes, but it's extreme moments of pain where I can't, and you almost fear, and because it has been said to me as well, that there can be a judgment there. Oh, sure, like, she's grand, she was doing that 10 minutes ago, whatever. I literally limped to our last location and tried to hide it so much, because this is on me, but it's also on me from very real experiences. You almost get punished for really pushing through. And what I mean by that is it's an ongoing narrative with people with chronic pain conditions. You don't ever have to prove how much pain you're in. It's totally your own experience, but it's just it can be difficult when you feel that energy and eyes upon you that maybe just don't understand it. What it did do, that experience, is it just gave me another tap on the shoulder to be like, right, you're not where you need to be, so let's work at this again.
So we're on the last day and we're doing our last bit of walking, and there's this feeling of relief. I remember feeling so tired, excited about getting to St. David's. I can see St. David's in the distance. That's amazing to kind of be walking towards this destination. It was really sunny. It's sunny weather, and walking up the road with everyone, feeling very, very fond of everybody around me.
It feels like so long ago that we were in Ireland. I can't believe this week has been a week, not a month or even a year.
Quiet entrance into St David's. The kind of lightness of it, that's the sensation I have of that cathedral. It's like, it's a huge building, but it's light. Once we'd all had our private moment, the official procession.
St David's was just electric. Felt my heart and soul felt so connected to the land and the people, even though I don't live there. It was just it was an overall human experience feeling, because when we got there and the cheering, the huge puppet, the energy and the effort, it's kind of similar to a feeling that you get when you're on stage as a performer, that kind of reception of love and like welcome. And
suddenly there was this huge crowd and huge emotion just for having achieved what we'd achieved, and also the feeling of us having been just us, and then suddenly we weren't just us anymore. We were dispersed again. And the end of our little time together.
There's an expectancy of what's about to happen. People are arriving, we're preparing the ground, ready for that moment when the fade out of the hubbub and you get that, oh, the performance has begun now.
Wasn't able to come out until the very end because it was an authentic reaction to our experience, but it's kind of frightening. None of us really knew what it was going to be. That had literally come out of talking to each other and singing along the way, and just as artists being able to understand how each other think and approach things.
I walked with you, alongside you, alongside our hearts. Always the refrain of water flowing and the singing of birds. It is possible to be alone with God, but not to live this life alone and survive. I am tired to the bones, and we're down to the bones of it. We felt really supported and like the group was at our back, literally, and that we were kind of expressing something on behalf of everyone. It didn't feel like it was just us doing that.
But if there's anything that you want to just leave not about the trip, but the reason perhaps why you came on the trip in the first place, then we'll just leave it by the stone here. And
Can I throw it away?
you can throw it. I mean, if you want to, we'll go to the sea and we'll lob it in the water as far as we can. Maybe see if we can hit Wexford.
And maybe scream.
So,
Out loud.
so yeah, I mean, if you want to leave it here, that's fine. If you want to chuck it in the sea, we'll get out.
No wonder Tipperary are going to win the All Ireland. Really big problems. I'm ready.
No, the real one.
She was trying really hard to run as fast as she could towards these big goals. I think out of fear that she'd missed out on time, or that time was running away from her through dropping out of that, taking a step back, taking a breath, being away from that pace for a week and a bit, made her realise that like it was only me that was putting that pressure on myself. There was a moment that I shared with Kate and Bonnie and Elsa on Our Lady's Island, where I just suddenly felt this kind of letting go. It's such a different way to reach meaning and truth and realization through space and through time and through connection with other people. And so by slowing down and just letting it rise up out of you, and I'm sure that the landscape aided that, wide horizons and the wide sky and the space and the kind of reflection of the stories of the ladies on the island that had come before us, and the mysticism around it and the folklore and the poetry, and it's all very evocative.
I had this idea that I was going to wear this dress on the Camino, and there were going to be times when I was going to be stitching what was going on in my head. That didn't happen. I was completely exhausted, didn't have 1 second to do anything like that. I do remember doing tiny bit of spit stitching on a misty wall somewhere, and then in a garden, was it in Johnstown maybe? That dress was worn every day and it was very comfortable. And I've continued to do stuff on it, but I realise now it's a work in progress. It might go on for years, actually. We'll see what happens next. And then this, I suddenly badly needed some red since I've got all this menopausal fire in my body. I thought I need a sort of swirling female redness in. It's going to be its own thing. I don't know what it is. So yeah, it's getting brighter.
Oh, that's such a lovely film. I hope you enjoyed it. Um, I'm really pleased in a moment to welcome to this live broadcast the people who took part in that film for you to ask your questions too. In a moment, we're going to have Susie McGregor and Elsa Richardson, who were the artists from Pembrokeshire, and Kate Powell, who is the artist from Wexford. Unfortunately, Bonnie can't be with us. I will also have Ian Tweedale, who led the pilgrimage. He is part of Journeying Guided Tours, and Will Philpin, who made the film. So I think we should bring them all on. Hello. Hi. Thanks for being here. Thanks for coming. Oh, do you know, I love that film so much. I love that it shows kind of that movement from one country to the other. Like we are in such close proximity, like 70 plus miles over the sea, and yet it's far away. I live very near the ferry, but for 15 years I never went to Ireland. But this pilgrimage route kind of has brought, you know, all those ancient connections. You know, I'm sorry to say that, but you know, it is of trade and spirituality, and you know, it's united that, and it's brought that back with this trail, and we can see that journey. And I think what's so interesting is that it in that film, it kind of there was a sense of identity created, and maybe that is because you're crossing two countries, you know, which are so near yet so linked. I also think the film reveals the journey of the mind and the soul and relationships made with ourselves or yourselves, but also with each other. And that camaraderie was incredible. And yeah, I'm very moving, you know, that you built over those 8-9 days of that walk. So I think I'd really like to, you know, kick off the questions, and I you know, do hope everybody who's watching, you know, have some questions, please write it in the chat. But I think I'd like to start perhaps with the artists and ask, so obviously, you know, you had expectations before this walk because you built up, built up to the walk, and I'm just wondering what your expectations were pre-pilgrimage, pre the Wexford-Pembrokeshire, um, pilgrimage was, and then, what did you think you were going to get out of it? And then once you were doing the walk, actually, did you get out of it? How did that change the sort of the pre and the after? Well, yeah, maybe you could start with Elsa.
To mute myself first. Hello, everybody. Yeah, I've talked about this quite a lot before, and so if people have heard it before, I'm sorry, but those that haven't, it hopefully gives some insight. It really felt like before I went on the journey, I was more focused on much more about what I was going to experience kind of as an individual in relation to the landscape and in relation to the environment. I think that perhaps because COVID intervened, I'd spent a lot of time walking solo in the environment. So I was much more focused on that. And I was worried about what was going to happen to that on this trip, because I knew it would be a very different thing to walk with a big group and to be on a kind of organized thing. This was a commission for us. It had all sorts of agendas about it. And so I was worried about that. And the thing that came to the fore and shouldn't have surprised me, considering what my background is, which is in a lot of work in participatory and creative work with people, the thing that surprised me was how strong that kind of temporary community was. I think we were particularly lucky on this trip that somehow there was a bonding that happened that was very deep and very strong. And I'm sure that not every trip has that in the same way that we did. But I think there's something about undertaking a journey like this that really brings us together in a way. I think it was referred to in the film by a number of us. Brings us together in a way that we are not so. We don't access so much in the kind of society we live in now. I think there were things mentioned about pace and about having space. For me, there's about the duration of the time that we spend together, and that we have made a commitment to do this walk, and we are together for 8 days, not 24/7, but pretty much. And that in the kind of space that's then created by making that commitment, something happens. And I guess it is, I think healing was mentioned, and I think it does touch on that. There's a transformation, there's a potential for healing to happen for the people present. So I think that was the thing that then became most significant for me and became much more about what we created at the end as well. That's probably enough from me.
Okay, so Susie, you were another one of the artists, singer-songwriter from Wales, well, Pembrokeshire. Did you what were your expectations pre-pilgrimage, and how did that change during it, or if it changed?
I think it's the idea of, the notion of having this kind of anticipation and expectation before doing a trip like that. It's almost impossible to not create to not create expectations about how you're going to feel or how you're going to react to. I think to the physicality of it, and secondly to the kind of constantness of being with people and in a group. And there's just nothing. I mean, yes, you can prepare yourself by, walking more and sort of getting a sense of what the route's going to be like. But when I was actually on it, and we met on the Pembrokeshire side, we met in the car park to get on the minibus to go on the ferry over together, and there was just this immediate sense of sort of looking at people in the eye, and some of them maybe I'd met before in different work contexts, but mainly we were all sort of strangers to a certain extent, but there was this kind of excitement of, okay, we're really in this sort of present moment together, and the landing of that, it was a very marked difference. I remember it was a very marked difference between the before and then the actual moment of arrival, and it's almost surreal. It was almost this kind of surreal adventure, and I think the film portrays the real sense of journey that we all went on. So I think it portrays that journey so beautifully, and it was, I think in a way you can't really have any expectations, but it's hard not to beforehand.
Oh, okay. Well, Kate, you're a musician from Wexford, and oh my God, I love the dress. I love that you wore that dress all the way through, stitching the route. And I absolutely love that Will chose to do the closing shot of the film as the route. Actually, no, that was continuing. So that like psychological journey of doing the pilgrimage. Actually, no, it hadn't stopped there.
Yeah.
There was more. I love that. Maybe you could tell me a bit more about that.
About
And
the dresses.
or
Yeah,
just
the dress.
whatever you want to.
Yeah, the dress. It was amazing to wear it every day. I thought about it a lot before, and I often walk in a dress. I find it very comfortable thing to walk in anyway, and that's already a bit weird because most people wear sort of proper hiking things, and then I had this idea about somehow externalizing what I was feeling, in that sort of textile-y way. And I thought I needed to kind of work out a little bit how I was going to get it on the dress and what the route exactly was and things like that. So I couldn't really do it on the route completely. So I did a sort of trace of it before and stitched in gold the basic map. And then I thought, okay, I'll just add to it on the journey. But as I said, what your expectations are and what the reality is very different when it comes to it. And so I did wear it every day, and I had my little box of threads and everything. But no, I mean, just the physical thing of walking all day long, I was completely wiped out by the end of the day. And so although I wore it every day, not much stitching happened. I remember collecting some bits of wool that were going to be made into the lighthouse and sort of felting them onto a dress. And but now, yes, it's still sitting there, and I add little bits to it. And I think it's going to probably go on until I die. I'll just carry on adding.
So do you think, Kate, that this journey that started with this pilgrimage is carrying on in the same vein? Like, do you feel like the pilgrimage has influenced you or inspired you or given a bit of a oomph to carry on this crazy journey of life that must be depicted through your dress?
Well, yeah, I mean, what it did was I mean, just the fact of walking every day does something to you. So it's really hard it's not something you can expect to happen, because it's sort of, you have to trust the process of what happens as you walk every day. So what happens is you sort of get stripped back of your brain stuff, and you just start to notice things in a different way, and everything is slowed down, and so I suppose in that way it's influenced me, because I know that I can sort of get there quite quickly now, because I know the process of getting to the place where you notice things in a different way. So I can quickly drop back into that and think, no, I need to slow down. I need to go for long walks. And from there, a sort of creativity can bubble in whatever way it comes out, musically or stitchily or painterly or wordily. I don't know. So yeah, I think in that way it's given me something very profound. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, that's amazing. So I'd love to bring on Will now. He made the film of When It Rains Creative. It's a beautiful film. Not only has Will made the short documentary, he's also made a number of short sort of 1 to 2 minute little episodes of the pilgrimage, which depicts the whole route, and that's all on, as well as this film, the Wexford-Pembrokeshire Pilgrim Way website, if you want to watch it. But yeah, so Will, I'd love to ask you. Hello. Thank you. I think I'd like to ask you kind of, what was your original vision for the film? Before you did the pilgrimage, before you met, Bonnie and Elsa and Kate and Susie and all the other pilgrims who went on the route. So what did you kind of think? What did you have in your mind? What I'm going to make, And how did that kind of change, I suppose? Because you also participated in that pilgrimage. So you had your own pilgrimage
Yeah.
as well. Did you realize you were going to have your own pilgrimage? Or did you think, I'm here to document a film?
Well, I think there's always an element in a project, in any kind of project, where you have a balance between what's happening, what is arranged, what you've tried to orchestrate, and then there's just always variables to that. There's always going to be things that are unexpected and things that will just come up and just spring up and rise up as part of it. And in some ways, giving into what a pilgrimage is, I think this is something that I kind of wanted to selfishly have my own pilgrimage, as you've said too, you know, exploit the fact that this thing is happening and we can go through this. And while I didn't want to kind of be within it as an artist within it, I felt that it was important to be with it as best we could, because I didn't want to kind of roll through and then sort of feel like the ghost at the feast of whatever had happened that day, and just be with it for as much as we could. And I think the things that changed, and while I had kind of ideas and a big, very early on, I just thought this is like a fellowship, this is like a journey, you know, through these beautiful, inspiring, like Celtic scapes. And I'd only had affinity because half my family's from Pembrokeshire, so I knew some of these landscapes, but most of it I didn't as well. So in many ways, there's a lot of it that you just have to give up to what will emerge through it. And most of the elements of surprise that came out of it, most of the kind of magical moments, like spontaneous performances and these wonderful kind of beautiful metaphors that people had with just how they behave and enact their own process and practice as artists. And there's a lot that's not in the film as well. Like, you know, there was like Ailsa gave us small shells. Ronnie found like this beautiful old fossilized wood on this beautiful beach. And, you know, I still have these things. I still hold them quite close to me. And I think, I suppose the surprise and the thing that emerged from it was the magic from all the people involved in it, and that's the things that happened, but also the humor that kind of suffused it from what happens over 3 or 4 days. And it's something that came up in I'm not sure if it's in the film, but you break down in a good way, but then you also break down. Everyone was basically very silly and quite ridiculous, and like it was very adolescent by probably day 5, probably day 3, if I'm honest, guys. And that was just really a fun thing to be around as well, and it eases you back as well as someone, you know. No one is like, well, we're lofty, groundbreaking artists, you know. It's nothing like that. It's just, in some ways, it is just stripping back, as has been said more gracefully, but from the artists themselves.
Oh, excellent. Well, I'd really like to bring in Ian now, Ian Tweedale, who led the yay, Ian. He led the pilgrimage. And Ian, and there's been a couple of questions in the comments box about accommodation, and one is, where's David Pepper? David Pepper was definitely part of the pilgrimage. I mean, you can see him on the film, and he's done so much. But yeah, so there's been a few questions about the kind of, you know, how do we do the pilgrimage, the accommodation, and indeed how we, you know, pick the sites. And you know, myself and Rowan Matson and Ruth and Owen were part of picking that initial journey. And you massively helped, Ian, as well. So maybe you could tell us a little bit about why you picked the sites along the route, because that's one of the questions. My personal question I wanted to ask you as well was, why do people go on a pilgrimage?
Ooh, that's a big one.
2 questions there.
I am orange tonight. I don't know what's going on here. Sorry about that. I've not been in the sunbed or anything, but apologies for that. First of all, it was like herding cats, this group. So We did have a lot of fun, but it was very much like herding cats. But one thing that let's talk about the route first. So what we haven't talked about is that this route is remembering an ancient journey in the 6th century that St Aidan took, going to meet St David. So St Aidan from Ferns in County Wexford went down to St David's to see St David. It wasn't called St David's then, but that's the journey that we're reimagining over this route, and we pick the sites on the way that have a connection with that journey in one form or another. So there are holy wells on the route. There are sort of all sorts of forts and interesting places, recreations of Celtic Christian communities, like the Irish National Heritage Park and so on. So and then once we get over to Wales, it's following the coast, the wonderful coast path. It was just stunningly beautiful, even in the mist and the rain and then the sunshine and so on. So that's the sort of route that we've got. Why people go, it's for a multitude of different reasons. I mean, there's obviously something in pilgrimage, and has been for hundreds, if not thousands of years. And I think Kate mentioned, when you get into that sort of flow, that walking, you just sort of go into a different zone in your head and your heart. And I think when people go, they might not have a particular issue that they're thinking about, but other people go because they're really grappling with something in life. They're at a bit of a crossroads, or there's an issue that they're thinking about. And what happens, I think, I can't remember who said it now, but I think it was Kate again, actually. After a few days, something does click in your head, and I see it time and time and time again. And I would disagree with Ailsa. The bond that you got on that group is the same with every group that we take. You just sort of bond as a group of people because you're just doing the walk. That's all you have to do for a week or 10 days or whatever it is. But after a few days, that something does click, and you get out of that mindset of busyness and to-do lists and so on. And after a few days, I think a different part of the brain clicks in, which is more attuned to the senses, and you start to hear things around you, like those birds in that woodland that Kate was playing music to, and they were answering her. You hear and you see things. You see the waves. You get attuned to your body. You get attuned to the sort of the tides and time and rhythm in a different way. So that's the thing that pilgrimage is about. It's maybe those sorts of reasons that you sort of go for. It's not necessarily, although the wonderful locations on the route are really great, it's not necessarily just all the locations you're going from one place to another. It's the actual process of walking that's really exciting and different. And this particular route is so much more about sort of the culture, the music, the storytelling, the poetry that's just in the stones of the places that we visit. It just makes it very special. It's that Celtic sort of music and the storytelling. It's just in the heart of people. So that was a very long-winded answer, but hopefully we got there.
Yeah, well, no, because I was going to ask, what made this route, what makes this route different to other pilgrimage routes? Maybe.
Yeah, it is. I think in particular, it's the Celtic nature of the culture that we're going through, and it's the way that those landscapes and people have been inspired to do music, write music and poetry and art and dance, and it's these places that we go through, they're just naturally inspirational. And I think that's that, plus the stories that we follow of the ancient times, make this very, very distinctive in comparison with some of the other places that I've been over the years.
Okay, great. And there was another question about accommodation, and one from Imelda Havers. Where did you stay overnight on the walk? And Well, in answer to that, Imelda and everyone else, that if you go onto the Wexford-Pembrokeshire Pilgrim Way, it's all there. There's accommodation providers and routes, and you know you can this route you can do by yourself, or you you can do with a group. So hopefully, all that sort of information is on the website. So we've got a few minutes more before we go. So I just thought I'd like to hand it back over to the artist and Will and kind of ask, hold on, unless there's any other questions which have come up.
Wow. What a question.
Hold on a minute. Let me just read okay, there's one from Jesse Earl. Did the group encounter any contested landscapes? And if so, how did the group individually and collectively navigate through? Does anybody want to answer that?
I'm wondering what you mean by contested landscapes. Kind of
you think it means fairy hills? No, fairy, what was it?
Fairy forts. I mean,
forts.
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking about there was the kind of sacredness of fairy forts, which is a very fascinating thing about how significant those ancient sites are, but are being seen as inhabited by fairies or there's also stories that children were buried, children that died were buried at those sites as well, which also is brings another aspect into why those sites are not entered and are very well cared for. But I wasn't thinking about that. I was thinking about the socio-political landscape really, and I think I actually made some notes before, and I did want to say something that the trip as well. I think another surprise for me was kind of how much I learned more through that journey much more about that kind of socio-historical and political landscape in Ireland and in Wales over history, and kind of what connects us. And of course, the stories are not the same. The history isn't the same, but there are things that connect us, and things about language and the absence of languages felt significant. So, of course, I don't feel necessarily that we passed through any landscape that I felt that was contested in the present, but I felt very much the contestedness of landscapes of the past, and that we were walking through and with that. So that felt very present for me.
I mean, I'm wondering whether the contested landscape question was about trespassing or land you're not supposed to walk through, but actually on the route it's all you can walk it. That's right, isn't it, Ian?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the two countries are very different in terms of the access to the land. So I think that in the UK, in Wales, the land is a lot more accessible generally to walkers than it is in Ireland. So there's a bit more road walking in Ireland than there is in Wales. But there are also a lot of places in the Forth Mountain and forest that we go through, and Owlet Hill and so on. There's a lot of places in Ireland where you're off-road. But I think because of the fact that there aren't a network of footpaths that exist in Ireland across the whole route, then there's a bit of back road walking, those sorts of roads with grass growing down the middle, not on major highways other than crossing a couple of them. So that might be considered contested land in some ways. But over time, that will develop as it has done on other paths like St Declan's Way in Ireland as well, where more of it goes off-road. So I think that's probably only the sort of contested bit in a modern day sense, but certainly the historical, I think understanding the connections between Ireland and Wales and our shared history as well is sometimes quite difficult. But it's very much the deeper connections of those Celtic links that we talked about earlier show that we're all people who are cousins.
Okay, well, there's two good questions I want to ask before we go. There's one referencing David Lynch, the filmmaker. That's a good one.
That's for Will.
That is for Will. And I do want to ask that because I do like David Lynch. Okay, we're going to ask that one now. And then there's another one from Nicola, which is probably for all of you. But we'll do this one first. So David Lynch theorized that films have an eye of a duck scene. A single scene containing the essence and feeling of the whole film. With that in mind, which scene is the eye of the duck to you? Maybe that should be for Will.
It's just such a great question, Connor. You know, I think that, I suppose I'm thinking, I can only ever think of it from a biased perspective as myself, having made the film. And the thing that emerged in every interview, and because we did, the audio track that you hear is actually quite a long postscript. It's actually like 6 to 8 months after the narration that is heard. So that, for me, was something that was meant to be a kind of, we're witnessing a recollection of a pilgrimage, not we're there with it. And as Ian also said, yes, there are like postcard moments and stop-off points, but it's really all about your personal perspective. So I think the Eye of the Duck is this kind of centerpiece of Ladies Island, because each of the artists in their own way reflected upon it as a kind of axis point of the trip. It was right before we got the ferry. It has such a rich history with the history of the female druids and the present day, how that's kind of been transitioned, or you could argue co-opted by Catholicism in some ways. So even the contested thing made me think of that, because I think in some ways there's this kind of history around that kind of space. And I think that kind of passage in the film for me does kind of, it's also visually one of the first times you kind of see them as a foursome all together in this circle. So it's very much that center point.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, I think my eye of the duck is that as well, when they're all lying there, and also I love it when they find the comb.
Yeah, which I still to this day, we didn't plan that, by the way. I still to this day don't know if someone had a glint in their eye and planned that, but it's beautiful, and I'm just gonna believe the fantasy because it's much more interesting. And I guess if I could add on to, hopefully there's like a collective thing, which is this happening, but I think individually, the Eye of the Duck, I have to single out Kate's performance with the birds, which was kind of, from an individual perspective, just the most beautiful representation of listening to landscape, listening to place, and responding with silence or your own voice, which her voice is through the fiddle, and it's a beautiful voice. And so these are kind of my two eyes of the duck each, I suppose.
Oh, lovely, thank you. So I think this will be our last question for the evening, which was from Nicola, and her question is, what do you think has stayed with you or altered your life post pilgrimage? And maybe we could put that to Elsa, Kate, and Susie, if you could give us just a quick little, what's happened.
Sure. Oh my gosh, yeah. I mean, the whole experience is in me. It's in, I mean, it goes without saying, the connections with the group is staying with me and will stay with me. And I did the Camino de Santiago in 2019. So I had a little sense of how I was sort of changed post pilgrimage, but doing this pilgrimage then since, it just feels like each time you drop into that space that is brought through walking, the connection to that space deepens. And so for me, I want to become a kind of addict to pilgrimage in a way, like just sort of keep on deepening that connection. And yeah, it's I genuinely believe it's a sort of a cellular change post pilgrimage in the body.
Wow. Elsa, can you Can you beat that? Cellular change.
I probably can't go any more micro than that. Yeah, the relationships with the people are, feel like we've got quite kind of deep relationships now, which will continue. And that is something that wasn't there before. Most of us, well, all of us didn't know each other. So it feels like we've developed friendships. But there's also, I was already engaged a little bit with making performances in response to walking, but I was doing it solo. And so what came together for me as a result of this was, I think, that collaboration of creating through walking that we co-created as a foursome. So it brought me to a different place. Collaboration is very familiar to me. Making work with other people is very familiar to me. The walking is relatively familiar to me. There was something about the way those things came together. And it's reignited my love of walking, which I had kind of forgotten. I used to walk a lot when I was younger, and I've had a kind of middle portion of my life when I haven't done so much of that. And so I am already on more pilgrimages, on more long walks, and that is hopefully going to be with me as long as I'm able for it. So, yeah.
Oh, wonderful. And Kate, the last word.
Well, yeah, both. I completely agree with with what both Susie and Elsa said there, and yeah, I remember after the pilgrimage, feeling as though I could walk anywhere. It just felt like it was odd to stop. I know that's a normal feeling after a pilgrimage, but it felt like I don't know, it was empowering to feel that I didn't actually need anything else except my legs to get anywhere and possibly the odd ferry. But yeah, that felt like I could go on a lot more enormous walks and drop into that place that Susie was talking about. Yeah, it's a sort of, it's like a little superpower that you can sort of grab whenever you need it. Go off for a walk. So yeah, that. And also, I mean, another thing for me is that I feel I know Pembrokeshire and Wexford in a very different way now, and I'm very grateful for that. I love Pembrokeshire so much. I've been back like 3 times since, and yeah, that's great.
Oh wow, I love the superpower. Oh, we all need a superpower. That's great to know that it can happen from just walking for many miles. Anyways, look, I'd just like to thank everybody who joined us today, this evening rather, and I'd love to thank Will for making such a beautiful film, and Susie and Elsa and Kate who took part in it, and Bonnie who's not here, and all the other pilgrimages who took part. David Papa, as noted on the comments, and Carol and Ronnie, and oh gosh, later I won't mention everybody. And massive thank you to Ian who facilitated it all. Huge thank you. And also,
it was wonderful. It was my pleasure.
Yeah, it was our pleasure. Even though I didn't walk it, I kind of witnessed it. And of course, thank you from myself, Rowan and Ruth and Owen on the Ancient Connections team. And yeah, just everybody just check out the Wexford-Pembrokeshire Pilgrim Way website if you want to do that pilgrimage, or indeed any pilgrimage. There's so many out there, and that benefit is for yours for the taking if you so wish. So I hope we've illuminated things to you, or inspired you, or just showed you some stuff. So thank you so much, and yeah, thanks for tuning in.
Thank you for hosting.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.